Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Mark Williams. I'm the Chief Artistic Officer here at the Cleveland Orchestra, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to the 1920 season. For those of you who are counting, you will know that this is the 102nd season of the orchestra, and this is the 18th season of our music director, Franz Welser-Möst, who joins me today for this special pre-concert preview. So welcome, everyone. Welcome, Franz.
Thank you.
You look very rested, but I know that you had a busy summer, nevertheless. What were you up to this year?
Hiking? It was actually a relatively relaxed summer. I just worked a little bit at the Salzburg Festival, doing 2 concerts with the Vienna Phil and doing 3 performances of Salome, which was the production from last year, which was so successful that they wanted to bring it back.
So now you're back in Cleveland with the Cleveland Orchestra, not the Vienna Philharmonic. How does it feel to be back? I know we missed you.
No, it's always wonderful to come home. And I said to my wife already during the Salome performances end of August, I said, I really look forward to coming back to Cleveland, seeing my orchestra, working with them. It's always very special, even though it's a little bit of a drag always to travel here, but, because there are no direct flights. But other than that, it's all wonderful.
Well, great. Well, we have a big season, so let's dive in. Let's talk a little bit about tonight. We're going to hear the Schubert Third Symphony and the first act from Prokofiev, Romeo and Juliet. Can you tell me a little bit about what we should expect tonight?
I think it will be, it's a program which is, I think, really delightful. I mean, Schubert Third Symphony is just sheer sunshine, and is. When Schubert wrote that, he was 17 years old, and he's full of youthfulness, and so even though Schubert's music is always a little strenuous for the musicians to play, but to make it seem effortless and all this. And it's full of musical little jokes, and so I love that piece. It's really delightful. And Act 1 of Romeo and Juliet, some of you, I'm sure, have heard when we played previously ballet music, like Tchaikovsky, Sleeping Beauty, and I think that some of this music is so wonderful that it's worth putting it on a concert stage. And the music itself just tells the story in such an immediate way and hearing the Cleveland Orchestra play that music is just, it's wonderful. You know, in most of the opera houses, ballet is always treated a little badly, and so when you go to a ballet performance in, you name it, the big opera houses, usually the musical side is not very good.
Well, and it's rare to hear these pieces performed by a really deluxe A1 orchestra and conductor.
Yeah.
So this is a real treat.
And the orchestra just is sort of made for playing that.
When you play something like Romeo and Juliet, a ballet, in concert, are you, even though there aren't dancers, are you thinking about dancers? Are you thinking about how the body would move or how that might affect the tempi and whatnot?
No, I mean, when you don't have to follow what they are doing, you know, you can just go for the storytelling in our way, the way we want to do it. And of course, you know, the music should sort of convey what the story is about. But I'm not thinking of dances when I do that.
So tonight's program of Schubert and Prokofiev also really connects to a larger theme in this season, this Schubert and Prokofiev project that you started last year, and I think it's safe for us to say we'll continue a bit into next year. Could you tell us a little bit about what about these two composers, different countries, different eras, very different style of music that they wrote? What about these two composers said to you that they would be good partners?
First of all, I think both of them are neglected in a way which doesn't do justice to their quality. I mean, when you look at the Schubert symphonies, we hear, of course, the unfinished. Everyone knows that. We hear often the great C major, but the first 6 symphonies you hardly ever hear. And the same is with Prokofiev. You hear the first symphony once in a while, you hear number 5 many times, but you don't hear often the other symphonies. And I have to say, it was interesting when I came up with this idea, and we take it also on tour, and I was talking to the Musikverein in Vienna, where we're going to play 3 Schubert symphonies and 3 Prokofiev symphonies in I think it's March, right? March, April.
March, yes.
And they said, yeah, 1, 5. I said, no, absolutely not. I want to do the other ones. And so we looked it up. And to the big surprise, in one of these centers of the music world, Symphony number 2, 3, and 4 had never been performed there. Number 6, the last time in 1983, and I actually, as a student, was there in the standing room back there with, and it was at that time called Leningrad Philharmonic, with their long time, I think nearly 50 years, music director Yevgeny Mravinsky. And it was a fantastic experience for me. And the 7th Symphony by Shostakovich, the last time was performed in 1961. With
Prokofiev.
Prokofiev, with a conductor named Herbert von Karajan. So, I think it's interesting how we also, which pieces get performed. We sort of seem to live in, we go in waves. There was a time when nobody played Mahler symphonies, and now everyone plays them. And there was a time where nobody played Shostakovich symphonies.
Right.
And so certain things come back after a while. And what is so great about, one of the things which is so great about Cleveland is that we have a very sophisticated audience which goes with us onto these journeys, discovering or rediscovering certain pieces of music.
I find it interesting about Prokofiev because in many ways he seems to be a household name, and yet in classical music at least, and yet there's a huge body of his work that most people don't know. Is there something about either as an audience member experiencing those symphonies or as a conductor interpreting them that becomes a barrier?
Yeah, Prokofiev's music, even more than Shostakovich's music, is sort of not obvious, and when you listen to it or when you tackle it also as an interpreter. The music, first of all, except Symphony number 7, which he wrote for a student orchestra, but the other symphonies, especially number 2, number 4, number 6, they are technically really, really difficult for an orchestra. So that is one barrier. And the other one is it's so multi-layered, his music. So you need an orchestra like this one, which has an enormous transparency to get the full impact of it. So often when you hear bombastic performance of these pieces, it seems to be sort of just loud.
Yeah, they
sometimes.
can be brutal.
Yeah, they can be brutal. But that's where also similarities are between Schubert and Prokofiev. They have this sort of very classical approach to writing symphonies. And the other thing which I think are enormous similarities, how they deal with melodies. I mean, Prokofiev writes these very sort of, again, classical melodies. And so does Schubert. So I think it's great to sort of rediscover these pieces.
So I know we'll all look forward to, obviously, tonight, but there'll be more Schubert and Prokofiev performances in March, and again, of course, on the Europe tour, as you mentioned. I get to cherry pick what I want to talk to you about. So a program that I'm really excited about for this season is Krenek's Static and Ecstatic and Mendelssohn's Lobgesang, the song of praise, or hymn of praise. Have you done the Lobgesang? You've not done it here before, have you?
No, I've never done it.
Ah, okay. So why now? Why this piece now?
Why not? There has to come the time, for everything. No, seriously, it's, first of all, when you look at the last couple of seasons and how, in what a wonderful way our chorus has developed, it sort of inspires me to pick more pieces with them, and also in the future we will have more and more challenges for them. So I think Mendelssohn is another one. We of course we know the Italian, which is played many times, a little less often than the Scottish, but the First and Second Symphony and also the Fifth Symphony, and they are all wonderful. They're charming. They have this enormous, wonderful beauty, and I think it's just time to do them again. I find it so interesting, as we were talking about how these pieces disappear and come back and so on. Mendelssohn actually, before the 1930s, was in Europe, performed more than Mozart.
Really?
Yep. And it was simply for political reasons that his music was abandoned, and it sort of seemed never to come back. Yeah. And I find that a pity, because I believe it's really extraordinary and beautiful music. And you're also going to get to know a tenor in this performance, Julien Prégardien. Even though he carries a sort of French-sounding name, he's German. And that's one of the most exciting artists I've met in the last 10, 15 years. So I'm very happy that we could bring him for this.
And this pairing with the Krenek, Static and Ecstatic, it's what, 10 movements of interspersed movements that are 12-tone structure, and others that are sort of free form that become these meditations. What do you think we'll hear from the pairing of these kind of very rigid pieces and this lush piece?
When you put together a program, there are sort of two ways to go about it. Either everything is sort of connected and there's a red line through it, but sometimes it's also great to put together sort of two opposites. Mm-hmm. And this is one of these programs, and I think with the Krenek on the first half, and again, another composer which has written a lot of music, and unfortunately, a lot of it completely disappeared. Right. But I think you will enjoy the beauty and the lushness of the Mendelssohn then even more.
So Krenek is a good pivot to the festival this year. The season, the next two last weeks of the season will be Berg's opera Lulu and a festival around degenerate art. Lulu is a big beast to tackle. Why do you want to do that here?
When it comes to the operas we play here, there are sort of several reasons for me. Sometimes there are operas where I think I really want to hear the Cleveland Orchestra play that score. Yeah. And of course, over the years now, I also want to give the Cleveland audience enough variety. And I love that. I think it's a masterpiece. Alban Berg had an enormous hand for the theater. I mean, Wozzeck is just as perfect as an opera can be. And Lulu is such an interesting and highly emotional piece. And by the way, I just wanted to say, when you hear the term 12-tone music, that shouldn't scare you. It's just 12 tones, you know.
But it's very lush, it's romantic.
Yeah, I always say about Alban Berg is sort of late romantic music with a few wrong notes in it. But the approach, and when you go back to what Schoenberg and Berg and Webern said, they looked at themselves as late romantic composers. Mm-hmm. And it was just a tool they used, the term 12-tone music. The tool was a different one, but it has become sort of, symbol for, oh God, this is ugly music. No, it's wonderfully, as you said, lush music. I remember I did only once a new production of Lulu, which I think was in 2002 in Zurich. And I remember so well the first rehearsal, and we started playing, and the orchestra played like it was ugly music. And I stopped after 2-3 minutes, and they said, the big news here is this is actually late romantic music. You have to approach it that way. I once did Wozzeck in concert in Carnegie Hall with the Vienna Philharmonic, and I remember afterwards there was a reception, and some contemporary composers came up to me and said, you know, this was really bad. That sounded much too lush and much too beautiful. That should be sort of, yeah. And I said, excuse me, you don't understand. I mean, Alban Berg wrote this kind of music for this orchestra, for the Vienna Philharmonic. Right. So I think there's an enormous relationship I always see between Schubert and Alban Berg, and it's the same kind of how they treat a melody. And Lulu is a highly intense piece, has a lot to do with Alban Berg himself. These composers had secret programs they wrote into their music, and only other colleagues would know what the secret message would be. And there's this one character in Lulu called Dr. Schön, and a very sinister figure where you don't know exactly. He's actually his son, Alva is his name in this opera, they have this very strange relationship, and Alva is one of the men in that piece which falls in love with the lead character, Lulu. And Alban Berg didn't finish this opera. And there was always the myth out there that he had died before he could finish it. But that's not true. What happened, his widow, Helene Berg, she sent the sketches to Schönberg to finish the opera. And there's this letter where Schönberg writes to her, oh, he feels so honored that to finish this opera of his good friend and student Alban Berg. 2 weeks later, he sends all that back with a letter that he can't finish the opera because of the anti-Semitism in it. Alban Berg was Jewish.
Right.
And so it's not true, but what Schönberg, I'm totally convinced, discovered that in Lulu, Alban Berg portrays his entire surrounding, and the sinister figure, Dr. Schön, is actually Schönberg. And Alva, his son, is Alban Berg. Right. So that's a little story behind all this. But we, Mark and I together then put a festival around it where a lot of great music which got abandoned then for political reasons and just sits there and waits to be rediscovered, will be performed like Schulhoff Symphony and
Mary Lou Williams, an American jazz composer, Martineau, William Grant Still, who the piece we're playing, a poem for orchestra, William Grant Still, really the dean of African American composers, a piece that was commissioned by the Cleveland Orchestra during the war.
And that was a time where actually Europe was looking to America. Jazz was an inspiration for the composers in the 20s and 30s in Europe. So, of course, you have then a saxophone also in the orchestra, and you hear sometimes these jazzy moments. And Krenek was another one who wrote an opera, Johnny spielt auf, it's called, where it's all about jazz music. So America at that time influenced Europe in a big, big way.
I'm reminded of what we were talking about earlier with ballet music, about having a really deluxe orchestra and conductor for this music. I feel very strongly that Lulu kind of needs that as well, that it's frequently, because there are technical challenges, it can frequently be not...
Ugly.
Yes, in a word, ugly. But when you have this lyric approach, when you have this beautiful kind of sound and a real understanding of the lyricism and the romanticism of the piece, that it's just gorgeous.
Yeah, I think it's wonderful, and I remember when I did this and it was a fantastic production. When I did this in Zurich, it was a big hit in the seasons where we played it, which was a little surprising to us, but because it was a great cast, and we have also an outstanding cast for this here. It became a real big hit. And we also have, at the same time, and for the first time, a great collaboration with the Cleveland Museum. At that time, there will be a big Picasso exhibition at the Cleveland Museum. Again, Picasso, an artist from that time. So I think, and we are trying to get people to come to Cleveland to experience that, what that time, the 20s, 30s in arts altogether really meant.
That's a very rich period. You know, one of the things that I'm seeing as a theme throughout this season and throughout much of the programming you're doing in general is this discovery of how can we, there are all the classics that we know and we love, but how can we dive a little bit deeper? How can we discover some composers that we don't know, or pieces by composers that we don't know by composers that we do? So what else is interesting for you right now in that realm?
Let me think. I think, for instance, in January, we are going to play Dvorak's Fourth Symphony. Who knows that one? But again, I think it's absolutely worth playing. And so we are trying sort of now and then to put something in which has that discovery moment. Or I can't wait to hear, I'm coming back to Prokofiev, but the Second Symphony, which is sort of very strange in many ways. And again, it needs an outstanding orchestra to pull it off. I can't wait to hear them play it.
Thank you, Franz.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.